everyone, welcome to Girl STEMpede. Our guest today is Dr. Alissa Bans, a professor of astrophysics and astronomy at Emory University. Hi, Dr. Bans, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get into our actual questions, I wanted to ask you an icebreaker. If you could meet any female in STEM from history, who would it be and why?
Okay. This is one I often have trouble with, but I'm going to go with two. Can I go with two picks? Mariah Mitchell. I'm picking two astronomers, by the way. I'm a biased astronomer. Mariah Mitchell, who I think was born sometime in the early sort of 1800s, grew up on the island of Nantucket. I know a lot about her because I did a research experience for undergraduates once at the Mariah Mitchell Observatory in Nantucket. And I've been back there to the observatory a few times, but I think I really like Mariah Mitchell, not just because of her scientific discoveries, but because she just always seemed like a really cool person. She had a really neat relationship with her father, who believed he was a teacher and he believed in the value of education across all, cross gender, taught her a lot about both math and astronomy. And then she pursued astronomy her whole life. Eventually, even though she didn't have a college education, I think was a professor at Vassar, I think. And I think the other reason I like Mariah Mitchell is that I read a book about her once that went into her teaching habits a little bit when she was at Vassar. And she seemed kind of like a fun teacher that, really loved teaching astronomy, but sort of was aware that didn't do grades and was aware that a lot of her astronomy students weren't going to be astronomers, but she still felt the sort of importance and beauty of learning astronomy just to sort of better oneself and hone those critical thinking skills. So I kind of jive with that teaching philosophy, and I do a lot of teaching. So Mariah Mitchell is up there. And then my other one, my sort of pioneering trailblazer person I like to talk a lot about, including during class when I'm teaching this unit in astronomy, is she has a very hard name to say, but Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin, who in the early 1900s, so maybe 100 years after Mariah Mitchell, was one of the first women to get a degree, a PhD from Harvard, first having gone to sort of Cambridge and then not being awarded a degree because women weren't given advanced degrees at that time, and coming over to the US and getting one at Harvard instead. So she was kind of a trailblazer, both in terms of, and then I think she taught at Harvard for years afterwards. So a trailblazer in terms of getting an advanced degree, but she really totally changed the field of stellar astronomy in like a huge, profound way. And that's probably my pick for most important astronomical discovery by a female scientist I would love to talk to.
I never heard of either one of them. I think especially within like all of STEM, astronomy, astrophysics, things like that are especially male dominated, so that you were able to come up with two is very impressive. Good job. And I would probably like to meet them as well. I like that they were teachers. That's very cool. So my first real question is, could you briefly tell us what you do, and could you take us through your typical day? So what's your favorite part, what's your least favorite part, etc.?
Yes, I don't even know if I have a typical day. So it's hard. It definitely depends on what time of the year it is. During the regular semester, I do a lot of teaching at Emory. So my typical day might be some class prep. Unfortunately, this is probably the worst thing about my teaching day, probably a bit of grading, which is it depends what it is, but usually not my favorite thing to do. Some time in the classroom, maybe some time doing some sort of extracurricular activity, like a planetarium show or something like that, meeting with students who are working on research projects. All that stuff might be filled within a sort of teaching heavy day during the nominal school year. Right now you're talking to me in the summer, and I am done with any summer teaching, and I'm on summer break mode, which for me is research mode. it's some time where I have more independence to just work on things, research projects in astronomy that interest me. So my typical day, like today, might be spent looking at some data, writing some code, occasionally some meetings, because I still do work with some students in the summer, reading some papers about astronomy online, doing some sort of literature research and things like that. I forgot what I mentioned grading would be the worst part of a teaching day. The best is probably interacting with students. I really like it, that moment in the classroom or talking to students after class where something clicks. It's hard to describe how you know, or seeing students get excited about something, but particularly excited that they're making progress in something. I really like that. Best sort of moment in research mode is figuring something out for the first time, or getting a piece of code maybe that wasn't working to do what you wrote it to do. That always to me feels like winning a board game or something, right? It's just a really nice addictive feeling when you've solved something.
I completely agree. I've done some coding in the past, and I get frustrated easily when my coding doesn't work. I get like really, really annoyed because I'm like, well, what am I doing wrong? And then it turns out it's like a comma, or I didn't like capitalize something, and it's insane. But it feels so nice when everything works and you finally figure it out and it does what you want it to. And what you were saying about teaching, I mean, I've never really had the opportunity to teach, but I think that if I were really, really passionate about something and I was able to give that passion to other students or to other people and watch them become passionate about it too, that would be great. So
Yeah, it's really, that is probably the thing, like we're going a little, sorry, I'm going a little long on this answer.
no,
but,
no, totally fine.
probably that's what one of the things that mainly got me interested in a sort of a teaching centric career was just even in high school or early on in college, talking to other people about astronomy, because I was, we had a lot of outreach going on at my research experience for undergraduates at Mariah Mitchell Observatory that I mentioned, and things like that, that I just really enjoyed the conversation with other people and sort of that informal education.
Yeah, no, that I completely understand that.